Somewhere in the last year, two people had a quiet conversation about your future. You weren't in the room. You still don't know it happened. But the interesting work stopped coming to you after that. They didn't remove you, they just stopped moving you. There's a difference between being valued and being developed. Most organisations are exceptionally good at the first. They need almost nothing to do it. A title, a compliment, a little more responsibility. It costs them nothing, and it keeps you still. Development is different. Development makes you portable, and portable people leave. So the question is not whether your organisation values you. It almost certainly does. The question is, what precisely is it valuing you for? The first person I want to tell you about had been in financial services for 15 years. I remember the first time he described his role to me. He didn't use a job title, he used a metaphor. He said, if I'm not in the room, the wrong decision gets made. And he said it without vanity. It was just a fact he'd learned to live with. 15 years in financial services, derivatives risk, the kind of technical depth that takes a decade to build and can't be replicated quickly. By year 7, he was the person they called at 7 in the morning when something was wrong. The person whose name appeared on every critical document, whose very absence from a meeting was noted. His manager valued him genuinely. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that his manager needed him exactly where he was. So the interesting assignment went to someone else, someone the function could afford to lose for 6 months while they learned. The external conference, the cross-divisional project, the exposure to the board, all of it went elsewhere. Not maliciously, practically. You don't send your best defender forward when the match is tight. When he came to me, he'd been passed over for director 3 times. The feedback was always some version of the same thing. Not quite ready, needs broader exposure. He'd heard it so many times, it had started to feel like a personal failing. It wasn't a personal failing. The organisation had never given him the broader exposure because it couldn't afford to. His value and his ceiling had become the same number, and no one had ever told him. The organisation had not failed him. It had used him, precisely and completely. Being indispensable in one place is not leverage. It is dependency, and dependency runs in both directions. The safest position is the one you can't move from. And in Judo, there's a defensive posture called Jigo-tai. Low, stable, balanced. Technically unassailable. It is also impossible to throw from. The professional who becomes load-bearing has adopted Jigo-tai without knowing it. They cannot be moved. They also cannot move. Stability that protects the organisation is not the same as security that protects you. This is what stalled looks like. She had a shelf in her office with 5 binders on it. Each one was a different organisation, different logo on the spine, different colour scheme. But if you open them, and I did, she showed me, the structure was identical. Stakeholder map, risk register, governance framework, change impact assessment. 5 organisations, 5 binders, 1 approach. She'd led a £40 million transformation programme. Before that, a £28 million one. And before that, a systems migration that had been running 2 years over schedule when she arrived and finished 8 months after she did. Her reputation was real. The results were real. But when I sat with her and asked, "What have you learned in the last 3 years that you didn't know before?" she paused in a way that told me the answer before she even gave it. She talked about stakeholder management, about executive communication, about managing resistance to change, all things she'd known for a decade, described in the present tense as if they were still being discovered. The work had felt new each time. New people, new politics, new pressures. She'd experienced that newness as growth. It wasn't growth. It was just the same river with different water. When she interviewed for the Chief Operating Officer role, the role she'd been building towards for 7 years, the panel asked her one question she couldn't answer. What have you done that you'd never done before? She told me about the question afterwards. She said she'd given a good answer. I believed her. But she also said there'd been a pause before the answer came. And in that pause, she'd known. 7 years of exceptional performance, not 1 year of genuine development. You think you're progressing, you're repeating. The third example is the one that does the most damage, not because it's dramatic, because by the time the evidence arrives, the decision is already 18 months old. He found out, not through a conversation, through a pattern he'd finally allowed himself to see. The junior colleague who joined 2 years after him, now leading a division. The project he'd been verbally promised, quietly given to someone else. The development budget approved every year for courses that made him better at his current job and nothing else. And the annual review, always positive, always the same. The feedback so structurally identical year on year that he started to wonder if his manager was working from a template. And then, eventually, the understanding of what had produced all of it. 2 people, a quiet conversation, a shared conclusion. He's best where he is, isn't he? And both of them moving on to the next item. It's not a formal decision. There's no paper trail. It doesn't appear in your personnel file. None of it was cruel. That's what made it so difficult to name. Everything was fine. His title was intact. His salary moved. The coffee machine still worked. Nothing had been taken from him, except the future. That had been quietly decided without him. And by the time he'd come to me, he'd been still for 4 years. And the stillness became its own kind of weight. Not just the absence of movement, but a growing uncertainty about whether movement was still possible. The ceiling is invisible because nothing around you changes. Only the future does. Here's what I want you to understand. If your skills only work here, in this company, in this structure, for these specific people, you do not have leverage. You have a job. Leverage is portability. It's the ability to walk into a room you have never been in, with people who have never heard of you, and be worth something to them immediately. Your development is your responsibility, not your manager's, not HR's, yours. And the question, the only question that cuts through the noise is this. Could you leave tomorrow and be worth more to the next place than you are here? If you hesitate, that is your answer. The ceiling is not above you. It is behind your eyes. Most professionals are not held back by their performance. They are being held back by their portability. The organisation did not build your ceiling. You built it. by staying still long enough for it to set.